Welcome to Knowledgeable Aging. I'm your host, Jason Kotar. Joining us today to talk about considering a financial caregiver, know your options, is Lisa Schifferle. Lisa is a Senior Policy Analyst in the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's Office for Older Americans. She leads the Managing Someone Else's Money financial caregiving program and supports the office's work to combat elder financial exploitation. Ms. Schifferle's career in consumer protection spans more than 20 years. Before coming to the CFPB, she worked for 12 years at the Federal Trade Commission, where she trained consumers, businesses, and advocates on scams, identity theft, and cybersecurity. How are you doing today, Lisa?
Good, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining. I'm looking forward to our conversation, but before we get started, Lisa, for those that are joining us for the live webinar, if you have any questions, type your questions in. There should be a control panel on your right side. Type your questions in, time permitting at the end. We will do everything in our power to get your questions answered. So Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Jason, and thanks for inviting me here to talk about financial caregiving. As Jason said, my name is Lisa Schifferle, and I'm a Senior Policy Analyst in the CFPB's Office for Older Americans. And today I'm going to share some information to help with financial caregiving and financial planning as we age. Now, caregiving is a topic that touches all of us. Some of us are caregivers right now, some may have been in the past, some will be in the future, and really most, if not all of us, although we don't like to think about it, will need some type of caregiving ourselves as we grow older. So to help navigate the financial aspects of caregiving, I'm going to guide you through the CFPB's new resource called Considering a Financial Caregiver, Know Your Options. It can help you start conversations with loved ones about planning for caregiving needs or help you plan for your own needs. And before I begin, I have to give this disclaimer, which basically just says that anything I say today is my own opinion and does not necessarily reflect the opinion of the CFPB. Now, let me start by telling you a little bit about the CFPB's Office for Older Americans. If you're not familiar with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB, we are a U.S. government agency created about 10 years ago to help make sure that banks and lenders treat you fairly. So if you have a problem with your credit card company, a car loan, or a home loan, then the CFPB is a place you can turn for help. And in the Office for Older Americans, where I work, we focus on two things. One is research, policy, and educational initiatives to help protect older consumers from financial harm. And another is creating tools and resources to help older consumers make sound financial decisions as they age. So we offer a variety of resources you can use or view online, including the one I'm going to talk about today. You can find them all and order them in bulk, all for free, at consumerfinance.gov/olderamericans. So let's talk about considering a financial caregiver. This is a new piece that's designed for people early in the caregiving process. So maybe you are just starting to notice that a loved one might need help with managing their finances, or maybe you're planning ahead for your own financial future. Either way, knowing your options will help you choose what works best for your situation or your loved one's situation. So what this publication does is it covers informal caregiving options like convenience accounts or adding a trusted contact person to your account. It also covers formal caregiving options like power of attorney, guardian, trustee, or government fiduciary. And finally, it gives you a list of questions to help you consider who's the best person to choose as your financial caregiver. So we'll go through each of those in this presentation. And I just want to let you know this is a free resource. It's available in English and in Spanish. And you can find it at consumerfinance.gov/MSEM, like managing someone else's money. It's part of our Managing Someone Else's Money series. So let's start with informal caregivers. These are people who just help on an as-needed basis, maybe when you're just starting to need help managing finances. And it includes options like a conversation partner, a trusted contact person, or a convenience account. So let's start by talking about the conversation partner. This is really just a term for when you give a trusted relative, friend, or professional an overview of your finances. With the conversation partner, you can share as much or as little as you want, and you're not giving up any control. For example, you might ask your broker or banker to send a copy of your statements to your adult child or to your accountant, or you might ask a trusted friend or relative to join you when you visit your bank or financial advisor. You might even share a list of accounts with a loved one so that that person knows what accounts you have and how to access them if they do need to step in the future. Or it could be as simple as what my grandmother did when I was in college and I would visit her, and she would have me help with balancing her checkbook. The next type of informal caregiver I want to talk about is a trusted contact person. A trusted contact person, if you name one on your brokerage account, it allows the financial institution to contact that trusted person in certain circumstances, like if they think you're being scammed. So the trusted contact does not have access to your money. They only get notified if the financial institution sees signs of financial exploitation. So for example, say I decided to name my brother as my trusted contact person. If I suddenly started wiring large sums of money overseas, he would get a call from the financial institution saying, oh, this doesn't sound like her, you better check in on her and see what's going on. So that's what the trusted contact person does, and they're available on all brokerage accounts right now. Some other financial institutions, like regular banks, may offer them as well. You just need to ask them about putting a trusted contact or emergency contact on your account. The next type of informal caregiver that the guide goes over is called a convenience account. A convenience account names someone to help you deposit or withdraw money and write checks. So as you can see, these informal caregiving options get progressively more involved depending on the level of involvement you need or the level of help that the person needs in managing their finances. So a convenience account is not the same as a joint account, where money is jointly owned and the joint account holder automatically gets the money when you die. So this is a really important distinction because a lot of us are familiar with joint accounts. People often have them with spouses, so that's what they go to first because they're familiar with it. But this can have unintended consequences. For example, say my mother decided to add me on a joint account so that I could help her manage her finances. Well, if she were to pass away, then all the money in that joint account would go to me, whereas she might want that money to go to me and my brother and divided equally. Also, if I were to get into debt and have trouble, they could come after that joint account for my debt, which is probably not what my mother would want anyhow. So with the convenience account, you don't have those issues. A convenience account does not change ownership of the money in the account or give your helper a right to the money when you die. So the money only belongs to you. So that's why we like to mention the convenience account. So those are the informal caregiving options. And next we'll talk about formal caregivers. There's power of attorney, guardian, or in some states it's called a conservator, trustee, and government fiduciary. And we'll go over each of those in turn because we have an entire guide on each of those. But before we do, I want to first talk about how to choose a financial caregiver because it's very important to think about who you choose for this role because a lot of financial exploitation, unfortunately, comes at the hands of a caregiver who may not be the best choice for having been the financial caregiver. So what the guide does is it gives you some questions to think about. Like, do you trust this person? Can you share your wishes? Will they make sure that the decisions they make are really in your best interest rather than their own best interest? And think about their personality. Is this someone who will manage money and property carefully and keep a good record? Are they organized? Will they be able to keep your money separate from their money? So it's a time to ask the hard questions, and especially to think about things like, does your loved one perhaps have an alcohol or drug abuse or gambling addiction or a mental health issue that might not make them the most appropriate financial caregiver, even though we all hope that our loved ones overcome those challenges? When you're thinking about a financial caregiver, we do know that a lot of the exploitation happens because the caregiver has an addiction and then they misuse the money to fuel that addiction. So that is something to keep in mind and ask those hard questions when you're choosing a financial caregiver. So let's go back to those formal caregivers. On this slide, you'll see the managing someone else's money guides. Like I mentioned, we have a guide for each type of formal financial caregiver. So we have one for power of attorney, one for guardians and conservators, one for trustee, and one for government fiduciaries. And these guides help you understand your role. If you are acting as power of attorney or guardian for someone, or in any of these roles, it'll walk you through what to do and how to protect, invest, and manage someone's money. It's designed for regular people, not for lawyers. So it's designed to help you walk through what you have to do if you are in that role. It also describes warning signs of financial exploitation and how to watch out for scams and where to get help if you need additional help. So let's start with power of attorney. This is the most common type of formal fiduciary or financial caregiver. And basically this is a legal document where someone known as the principal gives someone else known as the agent legal authority to make decisions about their money or property. So often people make powers of attorney so someone else can handle their money if they become sick or injured and can no longer manage their own finances. In some states it's called durable power of attorney, some states it's just called power of attorney. But the main thing to know is that power of attorneys are private arrangements. They don't involve appointment by a court or a public agency. They're just based on this legal document. Another important thing to know is that there are two main types of power of attorney. There's a healthcare one and a financial one. And if you have a healthcare power of attorney, that just allows the person to make decisions about your health and medical care. It does not give them any control over your finances. And vice versa, if someone has a financial power of attorney, it doesn't give them control to make those medical decisions. So make sure that you think about both when you are designing these power of attorney documents. And also a lot of people say, well, why should I get a power of attorney? Well, if you think about it, power of attorneys give you control to name who you want to manage your finances. So they also make it easier for your loved ones if you do become unable to manage your finances, because they can just pull out the legal document and they'll have that at their fingertips in order to manage your finances if needed. But you can still retain control until you are no longer able. So I know a lot of people are concerned about giving up control when it comes to managing finances. So that's something to keep in mind with power of attorney as well. But there's a lot more in our managing someone else's money guides, which again, you can find at consumerfinance.gov/MSEM. And we have another guide for representative payees or VA fiduciaries. These are the government fiduciaries. Basically, if you're getting Social Security benefits or VA benefits, Veterans Affairs benefits, then that government agency can appoint someone to manage your benefits if you need help managing your money. So the big things to know are that a representative payee or VA fiduciary only has authority to manage the benefit checks of the agency that made the appointment. So if you have other money or property, that person does not have authority to manage it unless you also have power of attorney or guardian or guardianship or something else. So representative payee or VA fiduciary only gives you authority to manage those government benefits, not the rest of the person's benefits. So it's a good idea to get a copy of this guide if you are a representative payee or VA fiduciary, and have it on hand, because oftentimes people don't understand what these roles are, and it can be helpful to you to have it and hand it to other people to educate them on what your role is. Now, the next type of guide we have is for guardians or conservators. Some states call it guardianship, some states call it conservatorship, but it's the same idea. Basically, a guardian or conservator is someone who a court names to manage money or property for someone else who the court finds can't manage it alone. So rather than the power of attorney, which is a legal document, the guardianship or conservatorship is something done by the court. So to give you an example, one of my grandmothers, unfortunately, when she was in her 70s, was hit by a truck and went into a coma, and she did not have a power of attorney. So while she was in the hospital in a coma, our family had to get guardianship for her. And fortunately, we were able to and get my uncle named, but it would have been a lot easier had she had a power of attorney that you could just pull out and say, okay, this is a person who can now pay her mortgage and her bills while she's in the hospital. So, but if you don't have that, then the guardianship can be helpful. It does mean that you need a court to make the determination. So it is a lot more work for the family members. So I do point that out just as a story to let people know why power of attorneys are often a very powerful and useful document and tool to have. But our guardianship guide can tell you a lot more. The last type of formal fiduciary I want to mention is a trustee. There are different types of trusts. We are talking about revocable living trusts. And basically, this type of trust is a legal document where someone gives someone else legal authority to make decisions about the money or property they put in the trust. So the trust also specifies who gets the money or property after the person passes away. The big thing to know about these trusts is you can just put some of your money or property in the trust. So you could say, put your car in trust to one child and $20,000 in trust to another child, or $50,000 to an uncle, or whatever it may be. You can put just a subset of your assets into trust. And people should not think of trusts as only something for the very wealthy. They can be tools for people with more moderate incomes as well. Now, this trustee guide gives you more information about the trust, but the main thing to know, again, is that it just goes for the subset of property in that trust. That's what you as a trustee have authority to manage. You don't have authority over any other money or property. So that's an overview of our considering a financial caregiver piece, including the informal caregiving options, the formal caregiving options, and considerations about who to choose as your caregiver. But before I move to questions, I want to let you know about two other resources, including this one, Planning for Diminished Capacity and Illness. This is one that we worked on with the SEC, or the Securities and Exchange Commission, to create. And basically, it helps give you tips about planning for the future when you might not be able to manage your money and property. It's similar to and a good companion to considering a financial caregiver. Know your options. We recently updated this advisory to include information about trusted contacts. So as a reminder, that's when you ask your financial institution to put someone on your account to be notified if they see any signs of scams. We also recently updated the advisory to include information about Social Security advanced designation. And that's another great tool for people who are planning for the future, because what it lets you do is it lets you designate in advance who you might want to be, who you might want to have as your Social Security representative payee. So you can list up to 3 people that you would like to have as your rep payee if you in the future become unable to manage your Social Security benefits. So this is a great tool, and if age-related decline seems far in the distant future for you, it's still a useful tool to talk with parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles or other loved ones. And it really stresses the importance of talking with people early about advanced planning before it's too late, before they no longer have the capacity, the mental capacity to make those plannings, or the legal capacity to sign the documents to create the planning documents. So this also has good tips about how to help you manage money when the time comes. On the next slide, you'll see our coronavirus website. So we know the pandemic has not only affected people's health, but also their finances. It's caused a lot more people to have to become caregivers, both because of more people leaving nursing homes and assisted living and congregate care facilities where the disease was concentrated early on, and also because there are just more people sick with the virus who may need help, or people who are laid off of work who then cohabitate with different generations. There's a lot more caregiving going on during the pandemic, and there's a lot more financial impact of the pandemic, where people may have gotten behind on rent or mortgages or all sorts of other bills, and really your ability to keep on top of your own finances can affect your ability to be a caregiver for someone else. So we'd like to mention it in the caregiving context as well. This website, consumerfinance.gov/coronavirus, has a bunch of tools for people who are affected by the pandemic financially, It has information about how to recognize pandemic-related scams. It has information about credit and debt management, loan repayment, and especially right now, we have a bunch of new videos about mortgage relief and rental assistance if you're behind on your mortgage or rent, and how to find help. So we hope that you will check that out along with the other resources and the Considering a Financial Caregiver Know Your Options piece. And I hope that the resources that I've shared today will help you and your community, and that you'll pass them on to others in your family, your friends, and your neighborhood.
The first question, Lisa, is do you have any tips on how to start conversations with loved ones about caregiving needs?
That's a really good question. Some people say it's one of the hardest conversations to have with a family member, because none of us want to think about, having help. And often older relatives don't want to think about needing help from their children. But the advice really is to start the conversation early, before your loved one is in dire need of help. A lot of us wait until there's an emergency situation, but then it's hard to fully explore the best options when you're in a crisis. So that's why we have this Considering a Financial Caregiver Know Your Options piece. Also, it's important to make sure that you and your older relatives have basic planning documents in place, like wills and power of attorneys. And often, because of the sensitivities of this topic, it's also important to raise it in a way that shows respect for the older person, usually the older person who may be planning and taking their desires into account. For example, you might say, "Oh, Mom, I've always admired how you manage your finances. Can you show me how you keep track of things?" Or, "Dad, I heard a webinar about planning finances for the future. Maybe you want to check it out too." So think about those ways to approach it, and think about using the CFPB's resources as a starting point for the conversation. You can give a copy of them to a loved one and then start talking about it. They are all free, and you can order any of our publications for free, in bulk even, if you want to hand them out in your community, at consumerfinance.gov/order, ORDER.
How often, Lisa, are those documents updated?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, there are certain triggers when financial planners do recommend that you look to update those documents. I mean, you should update them if you have a death of a loved one, especially someone who's named as a beneficiary in the will or as a representative, as the power of attorney, and make sure that the successor representatives you have are still, who you want to have. Also, if you get married or if you have a child, those are other times to think about updating those documents as well. So really major life changes. Sometimes if you move to another state too, you'll want to make sure that you have, legal coverage in the state that you reside in.
Yeah. What trends, Lisa, do you expect in the future regarding family caregiving?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, I think based on the pandemic and the fact that more and more people are becoming caregivers during the pandemic, I think the pandemic has really exposed caregiving as a pressing national issue, and the fact that so many people have to be unpaid family caregivers. I think that, we're seeing a push for paid family leave in some areas, so that's an area we may hear more about. I also expect caregiving may become more diverse and intergenerational. As generational norms change, already men are taking more of a role in caregiving for children and for parents, and I expect they will, do more of that. And also, as the country becomes more, majority minority, the mores and cultural norms may change in terms of how we care for older adults, as some groups may be more likely to want to care for loved ones in their homes than others.
Yeah. Somebody asked, as a potential financial caregiver, how can I tell someone that is getting to the point? How can I tell that someone is getting to the point of needing a financial caregiver?
That's a really good question. I mean, there can be little triggers. If you're lucky, they come to you and say, "Oh, I think I need some help," but that doesn't usually happen.
No.
I mean, you may find out that they lost money to a scam. I mean, often that's a big one, is that they lost money to scam. But that doesn't necessarily mean they need a financial caregiver. That can happen to people of all ages. I mean, the scammers are criminals. But if you start seeing changes in their spending behavior, if they're missing paying bills that they always paid, then maybe they need help with that. If they're forgetting appointments and other things, it doesn't have to be just financial, but if they're forgetting, to meet you for lunch when they had that plan, then that may be a sign that they're forgetting other things like paying their rent and mortgage. So looking for signs of cognitive decline and memory issues is one way, and then looking for changes in financial habits or missing money or new payments to strange new places or new people you haven't heard of can all be signs that someone may need help managing their finances.
Yeah. Does the CFPB have attorneys that consumers can use?
Well, that's a good question. We don't have attorneys to help with these types of financial caregiving documents. We do have all of these guides, which are available for free, which can help you determine what's best for you. We do have our complaint portal, which you can find at consumerfinance.gov/complaint. So if you have an issue with a financial product or service, such as a loan or a credit bureau, you can file a complaint there. And what happens is then the CFPB will contact the company and try to get a resolution for you for your complaint. So we do encourage people first to contact that company on their own, but if that fails, to file with us at consumerfinance.gov/complaint. We also have a bunch of attorneys that bring law enforcement actions. So if we're seeing a bunch of complaints about a certain bad actor that is, either having predatory loans or something like that, then that's the type of case that we may be able to bring an enforcement action on. But if you're looking for help for planning these types of planning documents, you can check with your local legal aid office or your local bar association.
Yeah. You mentioned scams, Lisa. Have you seen an increase in scams with our aging population during the pandemic?
Absolutely. If you look at the Consumer Sentinel data, which is the Federal Trade Commission's data of complaints brought in, both through their own portal and through a variety of other government agencies, they saw a big spike in complaints across all age groups during the pandemic about scams, about online shopping scams, about imposter scams. We saw a variety of imposter scams related to vaccines earlier in the pandemic, where people said you could get a free vaccine or you could get a free home testing kit, and it was Medicare calling, when really it wasn't Medicare. So definitely the scammers have taken advantage of the pandemic and continue to find new twists. Another new one is scammers pretending to be FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and saying that they're calling because your loved one passed away for COVID and you're entitled to funeral benefits, which FEMA does have legitimate funeral benefits, but these are scammers calling, trying to get your personal information and money, at people's most vulnerable time when they've lost a loved one to COVID. So if you do want that funeral expense money from FEMA, it's important to reach out to them yourself. They're not going to call you. That's a scam if someone calls saying it's FEMA.
Yeah. Somebody else asked, they wanted to follow up on that. Does the CFPB actually reach out to consumers on their own, or does it have to be somebody calling CFPB first? The concern obviously would be, making sure that this is somebody from the CFPB and not a scammer.
Right. Yeah. We do not reach out to people on our own. You need to file a complaint first with the CFPB, and then the CFPB would send that through a secure portal to, say, the credit bureau or the company involved, so that they could look at your complaint and analyze it and give us a response back. And then we would communicate with the consumer about what response we got from the company. But we are not, and most government agencies are not calling people out of the blue. So that's a big red flag of a variety of government imposter scams.
Absolutely. Last question, Lisa, and thank you again for your time. This has been really good information. In addition to what we're talking about today from the CFPB, what is the department doing about spreading the word of the existence and all the good things that the CFPB does?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, we have a whole division of external affairs working on that, and then our office is trying to do more webinars like this and more outreach events. We work with AARP, we work with other government agencies, we work with a variety of say affinity group related agencies, and if other people are part of a group that they would like to work with us and want to contact us, there's contact information on the next slide. You can
Absolutely.
reach out to us at consumerfinance.gov/older Americans is where you can find all our stuff. And if you want to email, you can email us at olderameriCans@cfpb.gov. And again, all the materials I discussed today are available at consumerfinance.gov/MSEM. So we would love to partner with more people if you're interested in working to try to stop scams and financial exploitation against older adults.
Well, thank you once again, Lisa. As far as knowledgeable aging, you can find all of our upcoming and archived webinars on our website, knowledgeableaging.com. You can go to YouTube, type in Knowledgeable Aging. We encourage you to subscribe. We update that as often as we can. If podcasts are your thing, you can find us on Apple Tunes, Spotify, etc. Till next time, I'm your host, Jason Kotar. This is Knowledgeable Aging.